All right, again, thanks again for coming. I'll introduce myself, and then I'm going to introduce some really interesting and fascinating people that I'm so excited that we're able to find a home for this evening here at the Unity Forum. My name is Jen Hilsinger. I'm the leader of the Troy Area Alliance Against Hate Crimes. We're a group that was formed at the behest of the Troy Police Department and other community assets in Troy to organize our community around issues of bias and anti-bias, really, and what we can do to build capacity in our town to basically be a safe place and a safe space for us to live and grow and work. So again, thanks for coming. Hope you enjoyed a snack. Feel free to grab a plate as we're talking and help yourself. We're going to eat while we talk, which is always good. I'm going to introduce right now to you Chief Gary Mayer, who's the police chief of the city of Troy.
Time is everything. I thought I was second, so I went to get a mint so I wouldn't be coughing or anything. Good evening. I'm Gary Mayer. I'm very proud to be the chief of the Troy Police Department. Thank you for having us here today. Some of my associates are with me. You may notice that they're wearing the teal-colored shirts. That's for Sexual Assault Awareness Month. That's what May is, and they decided to wear those shirts and told me about it after I arrived at work today, so I don't have mine on. I think it was a conspiracy, but probably okay. This group was started several years ago in partnership with the police department. We're very proud of our association with this group. We support the efforts against hate crime, not because we have a problem in Troy, but because we don't want to have a problem like any hate crime in Troy. We want to get out ahead of it. We like having groups like this, and it's a great association for us. You all know that we seek justice and we enforce the law on behalf of all people. We are very proactive in developing positive relationships with our community. Our community is very important to us. We go out of our way with our very diverse community, and we're very proud of that fact. We engage our community members by identifying issues that are important to our community. They've served us very well in doing that. They keep us ahead of things. It's always good to know your community before there's a problem instead of after there's a problem. We're very proud of our crime prevention and all the activities that we do. I'm very proud of our officers that serve with competence, confidence, and consistency. It's very important for us to have those high ethical standards, and we have officers who have very high ethical standards. They're well trained and very invested in our community. We heard conversation regarding bias. We've trained all of our police officers in implicit bias in partnership with the Royal Oak Police Department and the Shelby Township Police Department. We're going to continue that training with new officers, and we'll do it routinely with our officers to make sure that we're all aware of implicit bias and how to guard against it. We're here because we want Troy to be a welcoming place for everybody. If there's anything that myself or any of the police officers can do to help you at any time, feel free. We like engaging people in conversation. It's always better to show up, have a conversation with somebody, than find out later that there's something they want to talk about and we didn't seem that welcoming. So thank you for being here, and thank you for having us here tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Chief Mayer. I'd like to now introduce the Mayor of Troy, Dane Slater.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you for the invitation to be here today. And before I start, I want to recognize Jen Hilsinger, because Jen is one of our greatest volunteers. This is a passion of hers, and I want to commend her for doing this and putting this together. This is the second annual, and I've been with you at other events, and I just want to reach out and say thank you, Jen, for what you do for our community, and please give her some recognition. Today, on behalf of the Troy City Council and the City of Troy, I just want to welcome you to this event. This is such an important topic in our community that I think it's so important that we do these kind of things and we have this sort of outreach. And with me today is Mayor Pro Tem Abraham, who is with us, and I'd like to recognize her because I'm sure Edna shares my desire that one day we won't have to have these type of forums, and one day we won't have to meet like this because we've eliminated this issue, and we've eliminated hate, and we've eliminated bias, and all the things that are not good. And what we're trying to do in Troy is our little part to try and do something about the program. So about a year ago, we formed the Global Troy Advisory Committee, and what we did, our vision was to bring together different diversity, different ethnic groups, so that we could meet and share and communicate. Because I think what's wrong today is communication. And I always say, if you take away what we wear and you take away our food, we're all the same. We're the same people. We still enjoy the same things, family, our religion. It's all the same. We are the same people. But what we lack many times is communication. Communication between each other to understand our differences. And what we are different is really what we are all about. That's where we come from. That's our culture. And what we're trying to do in Troy is bring together those cultures and bring together those people for an understanding and a better way to communicate. And if we have issues, we have somebody that we can go to help us if there is a problem. And one of the first things that we did as a Global Troy Advisory Committee was become a welcoming city. And what that means is we joined an organization that's throughout the whole United States that says you're welcome in our community, you're welcome in our city. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter where you come from, you are welcome here, and we're going to make every effort to make sure that you're welcome and you feel welcome here. So we did that, and I have some members here today that are on the committee that I saw. If they could just stand, and I'd like to recognize who's here from the committee. We have a couple. Thank you. We're trying to make a difference, and it's such a great committee, and it's such a great group, and we're going to do some good things. And we've only been around for 1 year, and we've done some incredible things. The International Day at Troy Days was a great success last year. But that's what we're trying to bring to Troy. That's what we're trying to do, is have better communication, have a better presence, and make sure that everybody understands. At the end of the day, when you come to the city of Troy, you are welcome, and it doesn't matter who you are. So thank you for being part of this. Thank you for what you've done for our city. Thank you, Jen, for what you've done for our community. And thank each and every person here for making this the city that it is today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. I also wanted to have some thank yous that I wanted to announce from the podium. I thank you for that gracious, but I'm just one person in the Alliance, the Troy Area Alliance Against Hate. I wanted to send a special thank you to Naz Mohadeen, Ruhi Awan. Can you stand up? Stand up, stand up. Ruhi, Robin Siegel. These are Raji, Ranjana, Rahul, Ravi, Kara. I'm seeing everyone now. I want to make sure Lisa, make sure I don't miss anyone. This is this group of amazing, all women, but amazing groups except for the gentleman in the back, but who work really hard. We work all year. This is our biggest event of the year, and this is something that we're all passionate about. We are a community of folks who care deeply about our community and want to make sure that this is a safe place for everyone. So thanks again for all of you wonderful folks. Thank you, thank you. And now I have the pleasure of introducing the International Academy East Social Justice Project kids who are going to perform a skit for us to kick us off. Go ahead, guys.
Hello, my name is Fiona.
My name is Camille.
And my name is Sai. And we are, as you know, we are from International Academy East, and we are part of the Social Justice Club. And today we are here to perform some skits about microaggressions, which is a statement or offhanded comment, action, or incident regarded as an instance of indirect, subtle, or unintentional discrimination against members of a marginalized group, such as a racial or an ethnic minority.
Hey, can you help me with this calc homework?
I'm actually struggling with this topic. Do you want to go together to ask the teacher for help?
But I thought you were smart. Like, aren't you supposed to be great at math or something?
I am smart, but I struggle with certain things too, just like you do.
Oh, I figured because you were Indian that you were just naturally good at these things.
Bring.
Can you give me a recommendation for a rap song?
I don't listen to rap. I'm actually listening to Carrie Underwood right now.
Oh, okay. How is that Bollywood music?
It's Cardi B. Bring. Okay, class, now we are going to continue our conversation from yesterday about the civil rights movement. Please break into your groups from yesterday.
So this worksheet says that we are supposed to write about how Rosa Parks must have felt.
Do you think you could help, Fiona?
Well, your guess is as good as mine. Hello, do you know how to get to customer services?
Yes, ma'am. If you could just take a left turn at that sign over there, you shall see it on your right. You may want to hurry up, though. It's closing soon. Hello, did you find everything okay today?
Oh, yeah. Oh, you know, your English is so good, but like, what are you?
What do you mean?
Like, where are you from?
America?
Oh, didn't you like immigrate here?
My mom was born in Michigan, but my dad came here from India to work at GM.
Oh, wow, that's so exotic. Say something to me in your language.
This is your groceries.
Can I help you find anything?
Oh, no, I'm just looking, but thank you, though.
Okay, you know, we have cameras.
I'm not going to steal anything. Okay.
That was awesome. Another round of applause for our youth. Great job. Really cool. All right, I now have the pleasure of introducing our first guest speaker. Sandra Sabova is the Special Assignments Manager at WDET. A 9-month stint with the Associated Press brought Sandra to Detroit 27 years ago. She has a bachelor's in journalism and a history from Indiana University, and along the way added 2 master's degrees, one in library and information science and another in public administration, both from Wayne State University. Sandra has worked for the Toledo Blade, covering education children's issues, Detroit Metro Times, and FEMA, where she was deployed to Louisiana to help coordinate, communicate, and about community rebuilding planning efforts after the disaster. Sandra has won awards for broadcast, print, digital, community engagement work from the Michigan Associated Press, the Michigan Association of Broadcasters, the Association of Alternative News Weeklies, State Bar of Michigan, Michigan Press Association, and the Society of Professional Journalists Detroit chapter. WSU's Public Administration program named her Alum of the Year in 2015 for her WDET work covering Detroit's bankruptcy. Sandra teaches adjunct faculty at Wayne State, Political Science, and U of M Dearborn, Graduate Public Administration program. She volunteers with Big Brothers Big Sisters of Metropolitan Detroit and with Freedom House Detroit. She loves her husband, her dog, her bicycle, usually in that order. Find her sailing on the Detroit River in her spare time. Sandra?
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, everybody, for being here. My husband detests that biography, but he's not here tonight, so I just have to set my clock because working in radio, you're slave to the clock. So I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me, and especially I want to thank the police chief because he kind of set up my slides here and what I want to talk about, which has to do with communication and how communication can inform bias in certain ways, how we're communicating these days on a certain social network, and what we can all do to have better information online on our own sites and how we judge the accuracy of information that we see. I think a lot of times we wonder, we see things, we hear things, people tell us things, and we wonder, is that true? How can I find out? And so I want to talk a little bit about that tonight. Okay, that's me. We already talked about me. I do work at WDET. It's Detroit Public's radio station. Any members? Should I ask? Yes, listeners. There's some buttons in the back so you can remember. But they're on the table if you want to grab some when you leave. We're 101.9 FM and WDET.org online. Our studios are in Midtown, and if you email me, I will give you a tour. You can come on down. We broadcast NPR in the mornings, and we have a range of cultural, educational programming, really connecting people to the city and issues in the region and hosting civilized conversations, as we like to say. And one of the things that always is part of our work is truth and accuracy. And I don't think every media outlet can say that, although some might. So I want to talk tonight about, again, like I said, the truth matters. Some of what I'm speaking about is from a series of events that we're doing called Gimme Some Truth. You can find all of that information at wdet.org/truth, as well as my slides. So there's a lot of links in here. If you don't want to scribble, you can find these online at that site. So the truth matters, but so do social media in this day and age. That's a picture of me at Facebook headquarters in Dublin, for it's the EU headquarters, and I assure you it is a very nice building. And then, of course, Twitter. This is a graph of social media use, and I can't read it from here, but if you look, you can see the constant where the math majors, the upward slope showing growth in social media. Over 75% of 80% of US adults are on some kind of social media every day now. So, a question for you. What is the #1 social media platform in the United States? Facebook? Twitter? Instagram? Oh, you guys are a good audience because you have some things to learn tonight. It's YouTube. Believe it or not, according to the Pew Center, YouTube is now the most popular site. I drew like that purple arrow goes to that little YouTube dot because it didn't even show up until a few years ago. So we're always looking ahead and trying to forecast what's out there and ways we communicate, or where the Troy Police Department might want to put videos of the cat that I understand they're getting. YouTube is where people are going to see those. So don't say you guys didn't learn anything here tonight either. YouTube is all about it. Facebook is still very, very strong, and Twitter is there as well. This is by age. So if you want to communicate with a teenager, YouTube is your best bet. Facebook is actually the only platform that has declined among teen use, just a couple of percents. But all the other platforms you can see are maybe a little bit different than how you, if you are on the upper age of the audience, as I am here, what people are using. The point being, everybody is on social media, and it's growing. In 2006, I think I'm remembering this correctly, because I can't read it from here, but in 2006, Facebook had, what does that say, 6 million, 12 million? 12 million users. Today, so this is out of their earnings report yesterday, 1.45 billion, that's daily. Daily people are on Facebook. Right. So, tell the truth. You guys ready? This is your truth part. How much is social media a part of your life, specifically Facebook? Think for a moment, and now I'll make my confession. It's a big part. My mother called to ask if I was okay because I hadn't played a word on Facebook Scrabble for 48 hours. She didn't even text. She just went straight to the phone because that was such a disruption from my pattern of playing Facebook Scrabble. So we'll use that. It's also a big part of the economy, not just our lives, but the economy that's out there. Facebook also owns Instagram, WhatsApp, and I should add to this the Messenger platform, which is, again, like email, but all within the platform. So they're making money. We've seen that in the news. So here's your other question. And this one I will take answers on. Maybe. We'll see if you guys are shy. Facebook reported earnings of $13 billion over what period of time? A month. 3 months. It was the last quarter of 2017. Now, it declined a little bit in the first quarter of this year, but you can see from this chart it always declines in the first quarter of the year, and they were still higher than they've been, even with everything that's been in the news about them. So it is an economic powerhouse, and it is not going away anytime soon. So what is Facebook? We all think we know. We all use it differently. But we saw this come up in discussions, and this has implications for how we communicate, what our responsibilities are, what we are seeing from our friends and family, and sometimes strangers that are communicating on social media. What is Facebook? Is it a technology platform that just exists for the code that is there? These are some examples of kind of the technology side of Facebook that's out there. Is it a community? Right? It's made up of our friends. Our friends, that's a community. There's a new platform that has to do with government. That's what that picture is of. There are groups that we are all in, and these are just some of mine. These are communities that we feel a part of. We communicate and identify with people who have similarities to us. But it's also a media company, right? And a publisher. We share articles. WDET has a Facebook page. It has, on the left there is the trending box where you can log on, you see on your page what is in the news, curated for your interests in many ways. So it's all of these things, and this is new in the world. I mean, we've always had communication, we've always had propaganda, we've always had people trying to influence how we think and what we buy through advertising, but Facebook and other social media putting it all in one place is new and different, and sometimes a little bit scary. Studies have found people communicate in different ways. This is from an academic study, and again, this is linked on the site if you go to get it, about how people on Facebook generally, the more you share, the more you're coming from one source. So if you have somebody on your page who's constantly sharing news stories, maybe they're all coming from the same source and the same point of view. So that means what you publish matters. People see it, they draw opinions about you sometimes, and it's shared, and you don't know sometimes how far it goes or what impressions it's making. So it becomes important that we think about how we do this. Hence, give me some truth. So this is our series of events. They're involved with librarians and teachers. We're partnering with libraries in the community, and I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. So these are some tips that we share at these. So this is going to be really fast. I apologize. But this will help you how you can check what you see on Facebook and other places to determine its accuracy, ways to judge, and how maybe you can check yourself on things that you're sharing, because this is a nonpartisan phenomenon in the world now. Okay, so 3 ways to be a fact checker. Looking at the URL, looking at the language that's there, And I can't read the last one from here. What can you find out about the source? So let's go through a little bit of these. So first of all, the URL that your information is coming from. The URL is that www dot the location. Uniform Resource Locator is the fancy word. So you can see here the difference between the trick that's going on with what's known as fake news or biased sites is that the URL is designed to make you think it's the actual news outlet. So CNN versus this CNN-trending.com. That's the site that last week prematurely announced the death of First Lady Barbara Bush, which was shared by at least one real media outlet in this state. So even information professionals get tricked on these sites from time to time. One way you can check is look on Wikipedia. This is their page of list of fake news sites, and this is not limited to the United States. They have other countries on that site as well. But looking at the URL and thinking, is that really the URL of the media outlet or the university or the company that I'm looking at, or is that something that's designed to to fool me? Also, looking at what language is used. Different sides in political debates, different groups, different regions sometimes, different countries. We have different slang for things, different ways we label things. And a lot of times that language is very value-laden and can reveal our point of view or our bias or politics. And so these are some examples. When we use language like that, it can be perpetuating stereotypes and the implicit bias that we saw in the skit earlier in a far better way than I can explain with a single slide. So checking the language that's going on sites. And if you're curious, there's a very nice site that helps understand this as well. It's from the Wall Street Journal, and it's called Blue Feed, Red Feed. And they put side by side various posts from social media, some from news sites, some from purported news sites on the same topics. And so you can go on, and they have a variety of current issues, and you can see there's several examples. I just pulled one here that show you how a more conservative site presented a story and how a more liberal site presented a story. You can spend hours looking through that site too. Also, other sites that you can check. First, if you're seeing something online, you're hearing something on the radio, you haven't heard of that before, Google it. Check and see. Google that site and maybe the term fake news or history. There's also two really good sites. Factcheck.org does a lot. It's a searchable site. You can suggest things for them to check into. It's run by the Annenberg School, which is a very reputable academic place. And Snopes. Has anybody been on Snopes? Okay, good. Why am I up here talking? You guys know all this. Snopes is a great site where if you see something on someone's feed and you think, how the heck could that be true? If it's not, or if a lot of people have wondered that, Snopes will probably have checked it out. And they will post a background on it, and it's kind of like a Truth Squad kind of thing. Also, these are modules that I got from librarians, so you know they're good if they're coming from librarians. But this is and I'll just say since we're broadcasting the CARP test, but the R is in a different place on the slide. And so these are acronyms for ways to think about, to do a little check for yourself, along with the smell test, of ways to evaluate information. CARP and smell. And again, these are online, gave you the URL. And then ESCAPE, which is another good acronym that has to do with evaluating sites, looking at where the material is coming from, what are people trying to get you to believe when they are putting forth information, and how can you decide what their agenda is? Okay, so now that you are learning things and you can evaluate better and you're not going to indiscriminately share false information, I have a few more tips on how to share your knowledge and put it into practice. So first, and I will not ask for a show of hands, but we may have all at one time shared something before we actually read it. And I will tell you that in this day and age of the media where we want people coming to our websites and we count the clicks on our page, the headlines are from some outlets, clickbait, and from others are definitely designed to get your interest. And they may not be accurately representing what's actually in the article. Plus, if you put something on your Facebook page and debate ensues, don't you want to be the person that actually knows what's in the article? So don't share without clicking on something and looking through it, because sometimes you never know what's in there, and it might be very different than what the headline purports it to be. You can counter politely on Facebook. This actually came from my boss. So one of her friends posted this article about some exorbitant rate of autism that will be expected in the US population. And my boss went to one of the fact checker sites and put up this isn't true with a link to what it was. And thank goodness, right? So a very non-confrontational way to, again, counter with facts, because some people have done this fact checking for us. Also, here's one: hold your public officials accountable. If you hear them making crazy claims, ask for the data. Where are they getting this information? You're going to be hearing a lot more about this on WDET this year. But where are these claims coming from, and what media are checking the politicians? And I should put this on the slide, but Bridge Magazine is doing a series of truth squads on campaign ads, and they have already started this year in Michigan. So that's a place as well where we can really hold our elected officials accountable, because this all starts at the top. Now, this is the blatant public service announcement for WDET, but you can come to one of our truth events where we dig more into this exercise. We do fake news quizzes. We're working with libraries and police departments around the region to dig into everything from scams that senior citizens can find to some of the evaluation of information that I talked about, and better searching techniques online. So we started in Ferndale. In January, we had Sergeant Baron Brown, who's Community Engagement Officer from the Ferndale Department. We had librarians and teachers and students from Ferndale High School talking about how they find information and how they share information as well. And this is a working map of where we're planning on being. So you can see Troy is on there. I consider this part of it, because this is part of our message and our commitment to the truth. So we're taking questions after, I believe. Is that so? Okay, so that is where I will leave it, but I know this was a really quick overview, and there's a lot of information on here, but it is all at wdet.org/truth, and thank you so much.
That was amazing. Thank you so much. I needed to hear that tonight. I think that was directed right at me. Thanks for that. I wanted to make like a housekeeping note. You may, if you're sitting closer to the front, you may have a piece of paper and a pencil on your chair. That is for note-taking if you'd like, but also we're going to have a brief Q&A at the end of all three of our panelists. We're going to invite them all up here. So if you'd want to jot down a quick question you have, we're going to collect those at the end of the row after our third speaker is finished, and then we're going to collect them and we're going to ask questions from the paper. The paper is recycled. Just know there's some math homework on the other side. Don't worry about that. All right. Our next speaker is from Lansing and drove all this way in rush hour traffic to get here and made it on time, and so I appreciate that, Peter. Peter Doherty is the co-founder of and a nonviolence trainer of the META Peace Team. META is M-E-T-A. When we come upon situations when someone is being harassed, what do? We will explore the possibilities of creative intervention in such situations. META Peace Team has a history of teaching bystander intervention training with many stories of our Peace Team experience. So without further ado, Peter?
Oh. Is it possible to come down here, or is that not acceptable? Yay! I'm fine. Well, some people don't think so. Anyway, it's great to be here. I'm here with Mary Ellen Jeffries, one of my colleagues in crime. Our META Peace Team, we have a brochure if you're interested. We try to educate people to the power of nonviolence and the stories of nonviolence, and we do nonviolence trainings, hands-on practice of skills, to deal with verbal conflict in family or whatever, but also to de-escalate when there's potential of violence. We also do bystander intervention training, and we prepare teams to, when hate groups come to town and we're asked to place a peace team, fear of violence, we do that. We have trained, disciplined, nonviolent peace teams, and we're sending a team to the West Bank in June, 2 or 3 times a year, with the idea of creating space for the people who are being oppressed to take charge of their own life. Maybe they won't get shot today because we're present. It's that kind of thing. So anyway, this idea of bystander intervention. I'm going to put my eyes on so I can see what I've got here. When you come upon a situation where it's potentially or actually violent, to us it's very important. You center yourself. Nonviolence to me is about growing in depth and the capacity to call forward all the creative energies within us, to put fear aside, to put rage aside, and to be truly present in the conflict. So centering to us means take a few seconds or minutes, take some deep breaths. Some people might have an omelet. They might have an omelet, and that they are used to rubbing that as a way of being centered. Whatever. Center yourself and then proceed. So that takes practice. In a situation, we do not assume that the person who is being harassed is powerless. Don't assume I'm going to come and take over. Try to assess, does this person need assistance? How can I assist? Not take over, but, in fact, we might then decide I must do something direct. Everyone brings their gifts, their experience, their wisdom, and everybody uses it in their own way. Everybody's different. Mary Ellen is very different from myself, and we might do a whole different thing in a given situation. You bring a lot to a situation, your lived life. So, for example, if a woman is the one trying to intervene with a man, she might get away with a lot more than if it was another man with the macho thing operating in the mind of the aggressor. Another man confronting him. Or older people can get away with a lot more. I've gotten away with a lot more now that I'm 39 in being able to do stuff that I might not if I were 20 years younger. So you use what you have. And there are no guarantees. There's no painting by number with this thing. You use your wits. One rule of thumb for me, the more the harassed person is in real danger, the more I'm willing to risk myself. So you do your own risk assessment. But that's where I'm at. I'm willing to risk myself more if somebody is really being abused. Yeah. So these are things to consider in situations. So there are different ways you might approach it. You might approach the aggressor directly. Confront. That can have its risks. It might be very effective. Or you might choose to approach the one who's being harassed and address that person like you're ignoring the aggressor. You might just come on the scene and distract. I'm looking for City Hall. I've got to get there to pay a car fine before they close. Can you tell me where is it? I've been driving around town. It's a hot day and I've had a tough time, but I really need to find that. And babble on, and that might break it. That kind of intervention, distraction. Call on assistance of other people if they're around, so that you don't have to be an intervener alone in various ways. If an event takes place and the harassed person, the harasser leaves, at least go up to the one who's harassed. Can I help you? Is there anything I can do? That means an awful lot to a person who has just gone through a harassment. Just that kind of support, even if you didn't do any kind of intervention. But so a bunch of stories. Carrie, a dear friend, was in Holland. It was 4th of July celebration in the town. She came up to a parked car, a huge guy behind the wheel. He was real drunk. His buddy was in the passenger side. You know, the car's parked. And he's trying to get the keys away from the big drunk guy, friend. But the drunk friend was hitting him, you know, slugging him to keep him from taking the keys. So Carrie, middle-aged woman at the time, she goes up to the driver's side and looks at him inside the car. You're too drunk to drive. She opens the driver's side. You, get out. And you, take his keys and you come around here. Now you get out here. Get over the... So the guy does it. In a crowd, one guy was harassing another. It looked like it was going to escalate. So what did she do? She went up there and she went like this. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, and you smiley face will show it. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. And then the crowd started getting it. If you're happy and you know it, stamp your feet. People started doing it and laughing. It just broke the whole thing down. Absolutely broke it down. Let's see. In the back of a bus, a man was verbally belittling a woman sitting next to him. It was an almost empty bus. Do you have to have this? Oh, okay. So he was verbally belittling her, and she was absolutely stone silent, like she was paralyzed. So, I forget the name of the woman who went up down the aisle to the woman and says, "Is there any way I could help you? I'd like to be helpful. What might I be able to do?" And she went on that way, just talking, and the guy was sullen. And the woman said, "No, okay, I hope you'll be okay. I hope you'll be all right." Then she went back, sat down, and it ended. What's the goal? The goal isn't to solve their problem, if they're married or whatever. It's to stop the immediate. That's your goal, just to stop the immediate. That's all. You're not giving a lecture after or anything. Another story, let's see. I've got a list of things here. Oh yeah, I love this one story in Nazi Germany. Here in America, there was a rabbinic student, a woman, and she told the story of her great-aunt Sissy. So her great-aunt Sissy was coming home from work on the city bus. It was lightly snowing, I forget which city in Nazi Germany, and she was near the back of the bus. The bus stopped. SS officers get on. They start checking papers row by row. Anybody who didn't have papers, get out. That's a Jew. And a truck was parked out there. Get on the truck. And as they were coming back, she was shivering. Now, all the people in the bus are German citizens. She was shaking. The man next to her said, "What's wrong?" "I'm not like you. I'm a Jew. I don't have papers. They're going to take me away." And as the SS officer got there, the man hollered out, "You bitch! You stupid bitch!" And I says, "What's the matter? What's the matter?" The guy says, "My wife, she keeps forgetting her papers, and it's so embarrassing to me." The SS officer turned and left, not checking her papers, and she did not even know the name of the man who probably saved her life. Using creativity. Mary Ellen tells how she was a checkout in a grocery store, and a man who was deaf and dumb, and his wife was there, and 5 kids. The deaf and dumb man, took one of the sons against the wall and started smashing his head against the wall. So Mary Ellen got over there quickly in sight where she could see him. "Stop!" He couldn't hear, but it was clear. And when he did, he stopped. And then Mary Ellen said to the mother, "You must find help." Cops came to a house one day looking for a guy, I guess, and they got out of their car, and the man was there, came out on the front lawn, and they began to harass this man. And so the people living in the house across the street, two of them came out, making a loud noise, standing on the front porch, making themselves very visible, and the cops toned down because they were watching. Let's see. Oh, yeah, the homeless person's on the bench sleeping. A couple older teenagers came, and they were harassing this person. And the person coming by just said, "Hey, kid, you don't need to do that." And kind of putting herself in between the two kids and the homeless person on the bench. And just, they discussed for a while, and they were pissed off at her, and she just carried on a little conversation, and then they left. One thing about this, you might be estimating if you need to get in between the harasser and the one being harassed to give that person time maybe to get away. And I could see doing that. And when you do such a thing, if you're approaching somebody, you make sure your hands are very visible. I have no weapon. In fact, I am inviting. And if you address the person like this, you might keep trying to be in between, and that might give the person a chance to get out of it. There's no guarantee of anything. Absolutely no guarantee of anything. If I get a chance to say my name, hello, my name is Peter. So here's the harasser. My name is Peter. Joe. Joe. If somebody shares their name with you, the probability of their doing violence goes down 90% if they share their name with you. Hi, my name is Peter. And I will sound as relaxed as I am talking to you when I'm in that. I mean, we do an awful lot of this stuff, and I've been on peace teams in war zones 20-some times over many years, and practice really helps to make perfect. Practice helps to make perfect. Everybody has capacity to do good stuff. I think do I need to shut up now? Because we have conversation. I can't do three things at once. I'm not a woman. I just don't. Is it time or a few more stories? Or in a little bit. Okay. Maybe a couple more stories. I'm not just thinking of them easily off the top of my head. Oh yeah, Mary was in a parking lot, a parking structure. I don't know if she was just coming or going. And a car parked there. A woman was outside the car with the door open, hitting on her kid in the back seat, literally hitting on the kid. So what Mary did was get out and walk up to the woman. She chose to do this. She put her hand on the woman's shoulder. Yeah, you're really upset, aren't you? It's kind of hard. Yeah, it's kind of hard being a parent. And the woman, of course, stopped, and Mary said a few more things, and then the woman said, yeah, it's hard. Said to the kid, "Are you okay?" And he said, yeah. And then Mary walked away. The goal is not to solve their problem as mother and kid. How do you do things so that when you leave, the mother isn't more angry at the kid and you just wait till you get home and be more violent? We have no control, but that's something to keep in mind in doing that kind of an intervention. How can you be kind? And so the whole idea, well, I told you about Mary. There were, let's see. I had another story or two I was thinking of. There are many. We have a lot as peace teams. When we do nonviolent peace teams, we're a trained, disciplined, I say nonviolent army, working together. Never work alone. We always work the strength of a team, and that's powerful. We have bright yellow vests that say peace team. That has an authority. But anyway, if you intervene directly, oh yeah, here's Another example, if somebody's actually hitting on someone and they're not stopping when you say, stop, stop it, and they don't stop, I don't know, was volunteers willing to get up? 2 people right here? Can I get 2 people? 2 people. Okay, now say you're hitting, all right, say you're there, you're hitting on her. Just, if I intervene like this, he's looking at the back of my head. It's hard to be angry at the back of a head, but I am doing this protective kind of thing. No guarantees of anything, but that breaks things. You know, when we had a peace team at the state capitol with the right to work law that was passed December of 2014, was it, or I forget the year, there were some fights broken up that way by the peace team members. Just that kind of direct intervention. You have to feel that out, what you're able to do and what you can't do. Anything else I'm thinking of in terms of strategies and, oh yeah, distraction, you know, hollering out to a crowd. Hey, could we have a couple of you come over here help with this? Please, there's a situation here. Can you come over? If you're not ready to jump in with whatever the aggressor is doing. Another thing, we need to have the courage when it's people we know. Say you work in an office and one guy is being very sexist verbally in harassing another worker. We need to have the courage to go up and say to that man, please stop harassing her. I feel offended when you do that. We have to have the courage to speak out. And even when we know people, have to work with them. Anyway, I think maybe I should stop, right? Shut up, Peter. Okay. Oh, my last comment, I would love it if the Troy, what's the name of the group? Alliance. Yeah, the Alliance. If the Alliance chose to have our 8-hour nonviolence training here in Troy, we're doing these trainings all over. And we're also, that's an 8-hour training, and we're doing a lot of the bystander intervention trainings, like 3-4 hours, where you actually practice it. Those who come actually practice these things. So we have a flyer in the back. Hope you get hold of us someday. Thank you.
So much, Peter. Thank you very much. Thank you. Terrific. Our last and final speaker this evening is Mr. Saeed Khan. I'm going to read you a little bit about him as he takes the stage here. Saeed Khan is Senior Lecturer of Near East and Asian Studies and Global Studies at Wayne State University, Detroit, Michigan, where he teaches Islamic and Middle Eastern history, politics, and culture, and where he is also a fellow at the Center for the Study of Citizenship. He is an adjunct professor at Rochester College, where he co-teaches a course on Christian-Muslim dialogue. He's also a board member at the Michigan Coalition for Human Rights. His primary area of research is the identity politics of Muslim diaspora communities in the US, UK, and Europe. In addition, he's a founding member and a senior research fellow at the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, a Michigan-based think tank promoting the study and analysis of US policy and U.S. social and domestic policy. Professor Khan has been a contributor to several media agencies such as C-SPAN, NPR, Voice of America, the National Press Club, and is a regular panelist on Turning Point, appearing on the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, as well as newspapers and other outlets including Time, Quartz, the Hindustan Times, TMO, and Vieja in Brazil, and is also a consultant on Islamic and Middle East affairs for the BBC. He's also a consultant for the U.S. and UK government and the European Union on the respective Muslim communities. The Vatican's Cor Unum Dicastery, as well as the Foreign Ministry of India on issues of citizenship and engagement with its diaspora community. He's also represented in the U.S. in a delegation to the UK on behalf of the Department of Homeland Security, examining counter-radicalization issues. Mr. Khan?
Thank you, Jen. And thank you, everyone, for showing up. I had these really righteous slides, but I've decided to dispense with those because I know that they are not going to be better than Sandra's, and so why bother? Actually, they were going to be hers once more. So, thank you again for having me here tonight on such an important topic. So what I thought I would do is, instead of the slides, I would talk about me, because it actually does have some relevance to the topic at hand, particularly when it comes to hate crimes and the whole notion of bullying. So I just want to see a show of hands. How many of you have been the recipient of a really negative comment from somebody other than whom you have borne or somebody who has borne you? All right, that's about half the room. Okay, I'm sure if I went ahead and took those qualifiers off, that would be 100%. I was reared in England for the first 8 years of my life, and moved to New York when I was 8 years old, back in the mid-'70s. And for some of you who know the scene of New York City these days, it may be hard to believe, but in the mid-'70s, there really weren't too many South Asians there. And so I was an 8-year-old posh Puerto Rican on the playground of my elementary school, and would get harangued and bullied every single day for about 3 weeks until the principal of the school came to our home. Which, of course, for those of you who are familiar with South Asian culture, the first question coming out of your parents' mouth is, what did you do wrong? He actually saved me, both academically and probably physically, by recommending to my parents that they should send me to a private school instead, which they did. We moved 2 years later to Houston, Texas. And for those of you who know Houston today, you would also be surprised that around 1977, there really weren't that many South Asians there either, which meant that I had a slight British, slight New York accent as a Hispanic for whom I was mistaken in Houston. Again, going through a whole new set of haranguements and bullying in school, somehow came out of it unscathed and perhaps most importantly, without a Texas accent. Moved to the buzzing metropolis of Lapeer, Michigan in 1979. To coincide with my adolescence, it also happened to be the same time as the Iranian Revolution, to which I was then considered to be a fugitive from Dearborn, because again, they had no idea what a South Asian was, but the closest thing they knew was Arabs from the Dearborn area. And I would be called Ayatollah as I would walk down the halls of my 8th grade middle school and then on to high school. And I'm pretty sure most 8th graders in Lapeer, Michigan didn't really know what an Ayatollah was. I didn't know, and I'm part of the tribe. So the idea then that being teased, being harassed with having a strange name, a strange accent, a strange complexion, and thanks to the cuisine in the home, clothes that reeked when I went to school of, curry, was something which really had me vulnerable on several different sectors, but I think I came out pretty much unscathed, or at least that's what therapists tell me. But one thing I do have to say about the situation today when it comes to the discourse, and I'm really not that old, I'd like to think, is toxic. And it is toxic to an unprecedented level. And now, being in academics, one of the things that we do, especially a historian like myself, is we look at trends, we look at growth, we look at evolutions, we look at devolutions, about why these things are happening in the way that they are, when they're happening, and where they're happening. And there's two things that have changed dramatically since I was cruising the halls as an 8th grader being called Ayatollah. And in fact, I would say probably quite a bit more has changed even since the last 17 years of 9/11. And 9/11, of course, was a watershed moment for many of us, but particularly when it comes to the Muslim American community, there was, shall we say, a microscope, a magnifying glass, or some other optic device upon which the Muslim community was being subjected. But now we find that both the discourse as well as the targets have expanded quite greatly. And I would go ahead and say that there's two things that have changed on the landscape from even 9/11. One is what I would call moral panic. Now, moral panic is a term that defines a people who are quite scared of, and perhaps a sense of helplessness of the future. Now, remember, about 9 years ago, we had that little thing called a recession, which certainly did pack a wallop to an awful lot of people. But it was a perfect storm when a lot of Americans were starting to reassess whether the America that they had known, and hard to believe, I look back fondly at all of my childhood in America with all the teasing and all the bullying. It made me who I am, warts and all. But we find now that there are people who are truly worried about where this country is going because for them, the anchors of stability that they had relied upon no longer seem to be that reliable. And whether that is an economic stability, whether that is a political stability, whether that is a cultural or a social stability, we find that the tectonic plates of America are all starting to shift simultaneously. And in fact, by 2043, which is about one generation from now, America, by all demographic studies, is going to become a majority-minority country. For those who feel as though they are particularly invested in a particular kind of America, they are frightened about the uncertainty of what that new America is going to bring on the economic front, on the political front, and most certainly on the socio-cultural front. And so you see that there are reactions to this. It is no coincidence that according to the Southern Poverty Law Center, the largest group of hate on the internet today comes from white nationalists. They have by far more average tweets per day than, wait for it, ISIS. So clearly somebody has conquered ISIS in one capacity. And if that's not enough to scare some of you, by 2045, it is being predicted that human intelligence and artificial intelligence are going to equal or reach a parity. And then from that point on, artificial intelligence will surpass our own intelligence. Again, something that is going to create a wobble in the psyche and in the consciousness of many people. But moral panic is not the only thing that has shifted seismically in the last 18 years. The other factor that cannot be avoided, and let's face it, most of us not only don't avoid it, we run merrily toward it, is social media. Social media has served to amplify, as well at the same time, narrow our focus into silos, into bubbles about what we see, about what we perceive, with whom we interact. And oftentimes, whether it is within those little permeable spaces or not, we then become subject to a different kind of teasing, a different kind of haranguement, a different kind of bullying. Now, my dad, who still lives in Lapeer, isn't much of a tech guy. There are probably 3 South Asians in the world who aren't tech savvy, and my dad is probably 2 of them. We find that for him, a lot of these issues that plague us when it comes to social media, he's perfectly blissful. He never has to worry about a nasty email. He never has to worry about a nasty tweet. He never has to worry about a nasty Facebook post or a nasty Instagram. He doesn't belong. He has no footprint on social media, which I guess by today's standards means he doesn't really exist, because we only really exist in social media. The only interaction he has, and thank you, Sandra, for letting us know that the #1 social media site is YouTube, which I never actually really thought of as a social media site, so that might have been part of it. He goes on there and he watches old Bollywood clips. So, you know, I think that the performance here really verified my dad. I find that in my own interaction and engagement with social media, and with the work that I do both as an academic as well as having a media presence, it is inescapable to both be involved within these venues and not then almost expect that there is going to be blowback. Now before, there used to be the idea that if somebody wanted to tell you something, they either had to say it to your face or they had to crank call you, which of course then once you had star 70, you could then go ahead and call them back and you could yell at their mom and their mom would then yell at them. Or we find that with the advent of social media, people cravenly held back and hid behind their own anonymity. Either it was through avatars or through fake addresses, fake names. They tried to then create this veneer of secrecy, getting a nasty post from somebody named Cowboy USA, not somebody's name, maybe in Texas, I don't know, but that would provide a cloak. Today what I find, and certainly over the last 2 years, is that the veneer of anonymity is off. People seem to actually be proud of the things that they are saying. So when you hear names like Milo Yiannopoulos or Richard Spencer, who actually coined the phrase alt-right, they are brazen, they are unabashed, they want to have the credit, they want the likes on Facebook for being as nasty and as provocative as they could be, partly because they find it to be both economic and politically profitable. So we have to understand then the various moving parts that then leads to the kind of cyberbullying that we have. Now that's not everybody. There are an awful lot of people who feel the frustration, either born of moral panic and or the opportunity that is presented by social media in order to be heard. And of course this becomes the ultimate paradox, that as much as social media is allegedly galvanizing us and creating new spaces of personal interaction, it is creating an unprecedented level of impersonalness, even depersonalization, and from there, the next consequential step to dehumanization is not too far. I'm always interested in hate mail. I hate hate, but I love my hate mail. I'm always fascinated that somebody would actually take the time and pen an email to me because they don't like me or they don't like something that I said. And I find oftentimes that those are the most genuine haters. They come from a place of real despondency, maybe even despair. And I find, as we heard from the very eloquent examples of solutions with MetaPeace, sometimes engaging these people, recognizing that all they wanted was to be heard, that they wanted to vent. I'm sure for many of them, they don't ever expect me to go ahead and respond. But I always enjoy it after doing a media gig. For example, doing Canadian broadcasting. I remember after one month, I got a bunch of hate mail accusing me of being a Zionist. And then the very next month, I got a bunch of hate mail for being an Islamist. And I said, wow, if you could only make up your mind, because these things seem to be diametrically opposed, except maybe in the heads of some people. And mind you, some of the hate mail was coming from the same individual, quite confused. But I'm also mindful of the people who will go ahead and take an article in the Free Press online and feel emboldened to go ahead and write some of the most vicious, virulent rhetoric that's out there. Part of that is triggered automatically by what we now call bots, that there are people out there or organizations out there who simply, just like sending out mass mail, will go ahead and project these things in order to trigger responses. And of course, perhaps the most damning response that people trigger is the internalization of that hate into somebody's own psyche. And we find that this is a problem not only among children, but we find that the internalization is also affecting some of us who are no longer kids. People who are older, who either do not find it within their own level of decorum to strike back, they don't understand how social media works, they're not used to the new modalities by which hate is transmitted and how it is received, they tend to be very vulnerable. At the same time, they're also unfamiliar with the usage of trigger words. For example, just recently, someone on television was tweeting the phrase sleepy eyes in order to try to have a dig at a prominent media figure, Chuck Todd, who now hosts Meet the Press. Well, many people would have thought that the phrase sleepy-eyed simply refers to Chuck Todd's eyelids. Actually, it is a very old and very common anti-Semitic term. So we find then that these kinds of aggressions, which one can't really even call microaggressions anymore, are starting to come to the fore. 2 years ago, I happened to be around this time in California for a conference, and there was ads that were being broadcast every 20 minutes on, and this was in the Bay Area, on San Francisco television. Has your job been lost to an H-1B employee? Well, an H-1B is a very specific type of visa category. And, of course, this ad was a veiled dig at the Indian American community. So we find then that these codings of words, of phrases, is becoming more and more problematic. And I'm not sure what is worse, the implicit or the explicit. What we do know, though, is that the impact is exactly the same. So what to do about this? Well, through the Michigan Coalition on Human Rights and with organizations like MetaPeace, it is important to go ahead and join existing spaces that are both safe as well as nurturing to then create solutions. I find one thing is that when people talk about their own experiences of hate that they have received, it's not a matter of misery-loving company, but the fact that company appreciates empathy. And when there is then that idea that there is a common or a shared targeting based on one's religion, based on one's race, based on one's ethnicity, immigration status, sexual orientation, or gender, there's some common ground that can be achieved. And as a result of it, it becomes imperative for those who both have an experience that they can share and those who have the skills of navigating social media need to come together in order to then create solutions and effective strategies on how to deal with this. Because as I said before, we are, unfortunately, fairly early on in both the notion of America moving toward a new future, which is scary for some, uncertain for others, as well as still very early on in this social media phenomenon, which doesn't seem to really be going away anywhere. The strategies that we come up with today will hopefully then provide trajectories of solution for tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Saeed. That was terrific. So much, so many new ideas, new thoughts to think about this evening. I'm sure you have some questions. I'm going to ask my folks who are ready to, if you have written something down on your piece of paper, if you'd like to pass it to one of the ends, and my folks are going to come by and pick up your questions, and then Ruhi and I are going to, come on up, Ruhi, we're going to sift through those questions. Could we also have our panelists back up? Saeed, Sandra, Peter, would you like to join us on stage, please? Finish your bite. We have a few minutes. You're good. Don't fall. Yep. Okay. Thanks, people. Thanks, peeps. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so we have 3 questions to start with, but as we go on our conversation, if you think of something else, jot it down, grab one of the papers from another, from another chair, and my people will stop by and pick it up. If you just hold it up, they'll see it and they'll come by and get it. All right, Ruhi, do you want to start?
No, you go ahead. I'll give you the questions.
Okay, first question. Some of the questions on the pages will be directed at someone individually. Others are just going to be addressed to the entire panel. But go ahead and start talking if something occurs to you. Who fact checks the fact checkers, i.e. snopesfactcheck.org? What organizations are they linked with? I'm going to pass the mic. You're speaking into the, you'll have to speak into the microphone. Okay.
That's a good question. I don't actually know who checks Snopes, but they do. The one thing to really look for is what, I mean, we always say check your sources, right? So what is the source? Now, yeah, I have a whole other presentation, which I could try to do off the top of my head, but I will not, about data, right? We can take data, we can play with data. Like there's, what is it, damn lies and statistics, is that how that goes? Yeah. So, I mean, there always is kind of that caveat, but the important thing to note is what is the ultimate source of the information? And so when you go through something like the Bridge Magazine Truth Squads of campaign ads, they will say this claim was made. They will give it a rating of whether it's accurate or false or kind of somewhere in the middle, and then they will give you how they investigated that. And so that's something, then you can decide for yourself whether what the candidate says is true, whether the document, the public record, the data set, and also something else to look for is if there are multiple sources of something. So does a person's account of an event match what's in the official police record, match what you see in a video, for example. So that's kind of a quick overview. But I don't actually know who fact checks Snopes except to say that they're investigating other claims, and so they're doing their due diligence on what the sources would be.
Well, I would say probably journalists who have firsthand knowledge of an incident or an event would probably be able to push back on something which is less than truthful.
Yeah, nobody believes us anymore.
Well, and so here's the other thing. I mean, as an academic, I mean, we can share a kindred spirit about this. There are people who devote their entire lives to a particular topic, and now even those things are being thrown to the wind. I'll give you one example: whether the Earth is flat. This, I used to think, was a resolved issue. I think the next is going to be gravity is maybe. But the fact that what we thought were these settled axiomatic issues are now somehow the other being thrown up as doubtful for no other reason than the source that is providing it. So if we are living in a silo and the person who is seen as the high priest or the high priestess of that silo is saying X, well then we'll go with X even though Y has been proven, settled for millennia. So I think that that's one of the big challenges that we find. I mean, it's nice when somebody contacts the university media relations and says, you know, we actually have somebody here who knows what he or she is talking about and is willing to do that. The challenge is whether people will even accept that is being said, because I'm on the wrong news channel for them, or I'm in the wrong publication for them. That has now become the bigger issue, I think.
Have you been able to convert any of your trollers through interacting with them?
Well, Saeed's the only one with trollers, so I'm going to lie. I have no trollers.
So when you ask if I've converted them, are you like talking to Islam or just sort of in general? You know, yeah, I have actually. I mean, there have been people who, there's two kinds of trollers, right? I mean, one that detests the idea, and then the second type that detests me. I'm not so worried about whether people like me or not. In fact, it's kind of liberating when they don't, because then you don't feel obliged to say something that you're hoping they'll like you more. But when it comes to the subject matter, I think it's something that you said, that if you personalize it, if you give them your time, which oftentimes is something that is not experienced by them, You don't come at it with certain assumptions. You don't talk down to them. You ask questions initially. What brings you to this point? What brings you to this point? And then having that conversation. And trust me, it is a major time investment to get into this. Sometimes you look at the watch and it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you started this at 10 p.m. But there are times where it does work, but it is laborious.
I'd like to comment. Okay. A key thing that's discovered is the importance of listening. People are desperate for somebody to listen to them. Ours is not a listening culture. Really, to really listen is to love somebody. And that is powerful. I recall one young man in East Lansing at the university. That's one of the 2 real universities. No, Wayne State's there too.
Hey,
I'm thinking. Anyway.
Microaggression.
But anyway, he put out, during the Cold War, he put out a table in the student union with a sign. What do you think of the Cold War and nuclear weapons? And he had people kind of spewing, we had to bomb all those, going on that way. And he was practicing just truly listen. And he would have people, after they're hearing themselves say, well, I don't really mean that. He would find people changing. The listening is a powerful, powerful thing. I'm not just listening to people that are conflictual to think of my argument in return, but rather, can I really listen? What are they really saying? So that if I do respond, it's kind of addressing their aspect of the issue. That is powerful, if you get a chance. But to argue with somebody who's like a tea kettle that's exploding, to think somebody can hear you is kind of crazy when you think of it. If somebody is just unloading and you think you can argue with them, reason with them, no. If I'm exploding, I'm not listening to somebody who wants to counter what I'm saying. So there's a time for everything. Sometimes all you can do is listen, and they walk away. There's no resolution. I didn't convince them. I didn't even get an argument in. That's perfectly fine. That's one of the quote tools we try to use in our trainings. Be there, really listen, connect with this human being. If you get a chance to respond, well, wonderful.
Okay, this one is for all 3 of you, all of us. Okay, so how would you respond to a friend or family member who uses a prejudiced, racist remark in a casual way?
Anybody else want to tackle it? The best thing is to simply address it. I don't appreciate it when you use a disparaging comment toward so-and-so, or the way I put things, hey, all black folks are my sisters and brothers. I'm offended when you offend them, or Middle East, or whatever. Find a way to be direct without using abusive language in return. If you respond with an angry tone, well, that's an added mess in the heap. Why do that? Find maybe a respectful way. If you love your brother or sister, the best thing isn't to be yelling at them and screaming, but if you have real love for them, you can approach them with a respectful manner in saying how you wish they would stop that. That's true of any human being, because all human beings, in fact, are my brothers and sisters.
My answer's a little shorter. I just go, really?
Yeah, I'm being visited by the ghosts of Thanksgivings past. I have to concur with Sandra. I'm just like, really? Oftentimes what I find is that the people who still use that terminology are stuck in a different time and in a different context where, I mean, I'm again not excusing the prejudice behind it, but the acceptability socially of that kind of prejudice. And so it usually ends up being a fairly decent conversation point, at least by the time you get to the pumpkin pie. So.
Are there any positive aspects of social media? Do they outweigh the bad aspects?
There's a lot of positive aspects, I will say. I mean, I grew up in suburban Chicago, and I moved here as many decades ago, obviously when I was 10. Not so much, but I mean, the reconnections that I've had with some high school friends have been really, really great. I mean, I'll give you one example. Mary, we were kind of in the same social groups in high school, and when we were like first on Facebook, maybe it was early 2009, I saw a post from her that said she was bringing her son to Michigan for the first time. And I messaged her and I said, "Where are you going to be?" And she said, "In Detroit." "Oh, hey, you're there." And we got together, and I mean, I hadn't talked to her since college, and now we communicate regularly. We keep up. We see each other when we're in town, and we have both said, like, okay, for everything else we see on Facebook, like, this kind of makes it worth it. And there's Scrabble.
Yeah, I'm in touch with friends and family members from around the world. I mean, people I went to college with 30 years ago. It's terrific. Now that you've taught me that YouTube is social media as well. Seeing obscure videos, especially of bands that I love. A couple times I've seen live concert footage, spotted me in it, which is really bizarre. And I was like, wow, I actually was at that show. But the idea that I think this is important, that some of you may not know that the State Department has issued directives that people trying to obtain a visa to the United States must subject themselves to a social media investigation of the last 5 years, which of course has its issues when it comes to that level of scrutiny, that level of encroachment. At the same time, it could be a way for people to exercise a little bit more vigilance by what they post. So.
I have to add investigative tool into my what is social media, because it's technology, it's publishing, it's community, and it's also investigative. Yeah.
This is the last question of the evening. The 2016 word of the year is post-truth. Don't we have a right to believe anything?
Would you repeat the question? I want to get the words right. The 2016 word of the year is post-truth. Don't we have a right to believe anything? Is opposed to what?
It's post-truth, like past, kind of a
Post?
as if you find out the truth afterwards, like that.
I guess I'm not
Post-truth.
quite sure.
It's a question that's like
Let's see.
confusing, and I don't know why.
Word of the year is post-truth. Have a right to believe anything? Well, a key thing for me is I go to sources that I trust. There are all kinds of organizations that do, and individuals that do research on issues, and that's one key way of trying to get to the truth. You go to sources that you trust. They're not going to be right 100% of the time any more than I'm right 100% of the time. But that's a key thing. Go to where you think you can trust. And again, a lot of justice organizations, peace organizations that are out to deal with the truth of conflict issues.
I could do another half hour on this question. I mean, we certainly all have a right to our opinion. We aren't necessarily being responsible if we're putting that opinion forth as fact. I think it is admirable that I think it's admirable that people read a range of media or listen to a range, watch a range, but I think it's also a situation where we do like to be in an echo chamber. We like to be sometimes with people like us and who think like us. But I will say that it is not limited to the left or the right on presenting misinformation. Rachel Maddow misquoted a story of mine one time. So I know a lot of people like to watch her in liberal circles, but you know, we all like to pick on Fox News for accuracies, but it happens on both sides. And so really understanding, if you're hearing from somebody in the media that you know has a political agenda, be a little bit more careful on what you're looking for. And a lot of times now, mainstream media and very established media are getting that reputation unnecessarily. But I think really looking at the organization and the ideology on a whole and what is their agenda. Sometimes it's economic, sometimes it's nonprofit, sometimes that can frame the issues that you're looking at, but looking for things that are truly balanced and that are informed by sources that you can find. You can verify it from another place. Mainstream media will fact check each other because they're still competitive. And so picking down the middle is more like it. But it's also, and I will go back in time to old print newspapers, there was the news section and there is the clearly labeled opinion section. And that still happens in newspapers, and if you're not getting that in the media that you're consuming, just keep an eye out.
Oh, you got misquoted by Rachel.
I did. It's my claim to fame.
That's better.
Yeah.
That's better than not getting, noticed by her. But I find, and I see this particularly happening with students, is when they will make an argument, they confuse belief with knowledge. And you can never know what you believe, and you can never believe what you know. These are really two separate things. And so when we're talking about post-truth, of course, people are entitled to believe whatever they want, but it's not a substitute for knowledge. To end on a slightly optimistic note, there is something that'll come about after the post-truth era, whether that's post-truth, or it'll be called hopefully something else because that's just too many posts. Something will recalibrate. This is not a sustainable model for functional societies. Societies throughout time, particularly from the modern era onwards, have been based on the notion of truth. Maybe not an absolute truth, and perhaps with multicultural societies and diverse societies, it's important to have this multiplicity of truths as well, so that people can share and learn from them. But the idea that this is going to be something that will last a long time doesn't seem likely.
All right, please join me in thanking our panelists this evening. Thank you so much. You guys. Thank you. Before we, we'll do that in just a moment. I just wanted to say good night to everyone, and I have to correct an error while I still can. There are 4 folks I forgot to thank. So, Shar, Brenda, Cindy, and Meru, please stand up so everyone can thank you. I'm so sorry I forgot. Really, half the audience here put the evening together, which is exactly the way it should be. So, thank you all for coming. I hope to see you again next year. Thank our panelists again for a wonderful presentation. Terrific questions. And please take some more food, stand and chat for a bit before you leave, take some food with you as you leave. We're going to do some photos here, and then we'll be mingling. The panelists will stay for just a bit to mingle. Have a great evening.